Saturday is gone. We're here on Sunday. We didn't have rain again today. Ooh, the picture is shiny. I'm not sure how to adjust it. There you get the sun. Maybe here. That might work. Anyway, day 134 of Gran reading to the grandchildren. I haven't read the book. I kind of glanced at the cover and the inside of the cover, and I thought, yeah, could be a tough book. It's called Tear Soup, and it's going to look backwards because I didn't want to turn it because of the shine. And I don't think, yeah, maybe I can turn it still. Let's try. There, now I'm magically the other way. There's the book. This book was written in 1999 by Pat Schwiebert and Chuck DeKlyen, or DeKlyen, and illustrated by Taylor Bills. A Recipe for Healing After Loss is the subtitle. So, I'm confident it's going to be a nice story, because there's nothing wrong, number one, with being sad. And there's so many kinds of loss. So many kinds of loss. So Pat dedicated the book to Bill Weeks, my first hospice patient 25 years ago, and his wife Nancy, to Chuck and Dana, who taught me not to be afraid, to the bereaved parents, in the compassionate friends, parents of murdered children, brief encounters and suicide bereavement support groups, and the members of the AIDS support groups who have been my patient teachers. That's from Pat Schwiebert. And Chuck dedicated it to my best friend Annie for believing in me, to our children Morgan and Connor, and to my parents for encouraging me with their passion for life. And the person who made the pictures, the illustrator, Taylor, said, to my wife Lisa and our son Madison, for all their love and patience, and for letting me stay up late to whittle away page after page, and to Ray and Jean Bills for their continued support of their rather unconventional kids, and to our daughter Cadence Noel, who came into our family after this book was published. Whoops. The book is published by Grief Watch of Portland, and as I said, in 1999. So here is the first page. And I hope you can hang in there with me. Let's begin. There once was an old and somewhat wise woman whom everyone called Grandy. She just suffered a big loss in her life. Pops, her husband, suffered the same loss, but in his own way. This is the story of how Grandy faced her loss by setting out to make tear soup. For many years, the custom of making tear soup had been forgotten. As people's lives became more rushed, they found it much easier to pull soup in a can from the shelf and heat it on a stove. But several years ago, Grandy got a taste of a well-seasoned tear soup. One of her friends made it from scratch after her child died. As soon as Grandy tasted the rich flavor of that carefully made soup, she promised herself never again to assume that quicker was better. Because of her great loss, Grandy knew this time her recipe for tear soup would call for a big pot. With a big pot, she would have plenty of room for all the memories, all the misgivings, all the feelings, and all the tears she needed to stew in the pot over time. She put on her apron because she knew it would get messy. It seems I picked this book this morning. Long time ago, just pulled it the first book out of the bag. So just keep breathing here. It seems that grief is never clean. People feel misunderstood. Feelings get hurt. And wrong assumptions are made all over the place. To make matters worse, grief always takes longer to cook than anyone wants it to. And then Grandy started to cry. At first, she sobbed. Sometimes she wept quietly. And sometimes, when she was in a safe place where no one could hear her, she even wailed. Grandy knew she had to make much of this part of the soup alone. She learned from past experiences that most people don't like to be around tears. Her friends would worry if they knew just how many tears Grandy's recipe called for this time. So the old and somewhat wise woman reflected on her own special recipe as she looked down into the large, overflowing pot of memories. It was a task she would repeat many times during the next few months. Whoops. Grandy winced when she took a sip of the broth. All she could taste was the salt from her tears. It tasted bitter, but she knew this was where she had to start. And for now, it was the only thing on her menu. Oh my goodness. I don't think this book was opened very many times. There were things that Grandy never wanted to forget. These included the good times and the bad times, the silly and the sad times. With her arms full of memories, Grandy made many trips to the kitchen. One at a time, she slowly stirred all her precious and not so precious memories into the pot. But eventually, she ran out of things to add. Grandy's arms ached, and she felt stone cold and empty. There were no words that could describe the pain she was feeling. What's more, when she looked out the window, it surprised her to see how the rest of the world was going on as usual, while her world had stopped. Her grandson, Chester, who just wanted his Grandy to be happy again, hoped his chocolate drops would make her feel better. Mrs. Bloomklotz, Miss Chadwick, and Mr. Long, all brave yet fearful neighbors, dropped by to see how Grandy was doing. They filled the air with words, but none of their words took the smell of tear soup away. Grandy was gracious because she knew how helpless her friends felt. They wanted to fix her, but they couldn't. All Grandy really needed from them at that moment was a knowing look and a warm hug. There were also days when Grandy hungered for a thoughtful ear. Sometimes She would ask total strangers, care to join me in a bowl of tear soup? No thanks, most would reply. I don't have time for tear soup today. Even some of Grandy's friends hurried past her house and pretended not to notice the aroma of tear soup coming through her open door. Grandy found that most people can tolerate only a cup of someone else's tear soup. A giant bowl where Grandy could repeatedly share her sadness in great detail was left for a few willing friends. I'm here, cried Midge. I got here as fast as I could, and I'll be here whenever you need me. What a tragedy. I'm so sorry you're having to make such a big pot of soup. Oh, what a relief. Grandy knew she didn't have to be careful what she said around Midge. Midge wouldn't try to talk her out of anything she was feeling, and Grandy could even laugh and not worry that Midge would assume Grandy was over her grief. Sorry I couldn't get here sooner, said Midge. No problem, replied Grandy. I've had plenty of help, but most of these friends will be history pretty soon. They'll be over my tragedy long before I am, but I know you'll still be around. I don't know what to say, but I'll be glad to listen, Midge said tenderly. Come on, tell me all about it while we make some bread to go along with your soup. These two friends, who had shared 1,000 laughs and just as many tears, pounded at the bread dough together. I feel like I'm unraveling, Grandy cried. I'm mad, I'm confused, I can't make any decisions. Nobody can make me feel good. I'm a mess. I just didn't realize it would be this hard. Why don't we go for a walk while we wait for the bread to rise? Midge suggested. I know exercise is supposed to help me feel like I have a concrete... I know exercise is supposed to help me, but I feel like I have concrete blocks strapped to my legs. We'd better not go too far or you'll have to carry me home, moaned Grandy. Mrs. Cries-a-Lot called and reminded Grandy that she had been making tear soup for years and would be more than glad to come right over and show her how to make it the correct way. Thanks, but no, said Grandy. This pot has my name on it. Grandy knew better than to let Mrs. Cries-a-Lot or anyone else tell her what she should do to get through a terrible loss. Next, her recipe called for some comfort food. For Grandy, this meant mashed potatoes or ice cream. Comfort food always makes you feel better. at least for a little while. It gets past that big lump in your throat when other foods can't. I think I need some chocolate too. After all, it was her soup. Grandy kept attending worship, even though she was mad at God. Sometimes she yelled at God and asked why this happened. And sometimes she demanded to know where God was when she was feeling so all alone. Still, Grandy trusted God, but she didn't understand God. She sensed that people believed that if she really had faith, she would be spared deep sorrow, anger, and loneliness. Grandy kept reminding herself to be grateful for all the emotions that God had given her. On some afternoons, people would ask questions like, "Is it soup yet?" Or, "How long is it going to take? You've been at this for over a month now. It's time to get out of the kitchen." Grandy fumed at the caller's advice. Grandy looked forward to getting the mail each day. She dreaded the day when no more sympathy cards would come. When she was alone and needed to think, she found it helpful to keep notes on her soup making. From the kitchen of Grandy, 10:06. Today I am upset that I have to be making this soup. 11:21. I don't think anyone remembers that I'm making soup from scratch. 11:29. What's the use? Life seems to be so hard. 3:28. I'm beginning to like the taste of this soup. I think I could live on it forever. Thank goodness. Whoops, let's do this. Sorry for the sniffling. Thank goodness Grandy and Pops have been married a long time. They already knew each other's tear soup would be different. Secretly, Grandy wished Pops would put more flavoring into his soup, but he doesn't want to, and he's perfectly content to dine alone and sip his own soup. Making tear soup is hard work. Sometimes it was all she could think about. Even the things Grandy used to love to do, she didn't have the energy for, nor did she care about it anymore. Some of Grandy's friends over the years had not tended to their soup. Their soup boiled over, and the pot scorched. What a mess! It took them a long time to clean up their pots and start over. The smell of burnt soup still lingered in some of their homes. Grandy knew there were times when she needed to take a break from her soup making. Even though it was hard to do, she forced herself to get away. Grandy heard that a neighbor was having to take her turn in the kitchen. Some people thought that the neighbor was eating too much tear soup. So Grandy, being an old and somewhat wise woman, called and invited her to a special soup gathering where it's not bad manners to cry in your soup or to have a second helping. Soon the thoughtful cooks sat at Grandy's table and discussed the process of making tear soup. There are some parts that require help from friends and some parts that you just have to do alone. They shared stories about soup making they wouldn't dare tell anyone else for fear of being judged a bad cook. They all laughed knowingly when Grandy remarked on how days when she was daydreaming while driving, she was glad that the car seemed to know where she wanted to go. These people had become Grandy's new best friends. One day, as Grandy and Chester were going for a drive, Chester asked, "Mom says you've been making tear soup. What does she mean?" "Well, tear soup is a way for you to sort through all the different types of feelings and memories you have when you lose someone or something special. Remember when your baby brother died right before he was born and your mom sat for days holding his blanket and weeping? She was making tear soup. You made tear soup yourself by acting out your own disappointment when you shouted at Jason, wishing his brother would die too. Remember when Billy's dog died and he didn't want to play with you? Not feeling like having fun is one of the ingredients of tear soup also. And remember when Aunt Meg got divorced and they had to move? There was a lot of tear soup simmering in that house. Some days when you're making tear soup, it's even hard to breathe. Some days you feel like running away. You just hope a better day comes along soon. And then comes one of the hardest parts of making tear soup. It's when you decide it may be okay to eat something instead of soup all the time. The next morning, as Grandy was cleaning up, Chester asked her if she was done making her tear soup. Well, I don't think you actually ever finish. The hard work of making this batch of soup is almost done though. I'll put the rest in the freezer and we'll pull it out from time to time to have a little taste. So what else have you learned making tear soup, Grandy? I've learned that grief, like a pot of soup, changes the longer it simmers and the more things you put into it. I've learned that sometimes people say unkind things, but they really don't mean to hurt you. And most importantly, I've learned that there is something down deep within all of us ready to help us survive the things we think we can't survive. Grandy, you know so much. What will I do after you die? Don't worry, I will leave you my recipe for tear soup. There's the faithful puppy who's been with her all the time. Grandy's cooking tips. Grief is the process you go through as you adjust to the loss of anything or anyone important in your life. The loss of a job, a move, divorce, death of someone you love, or a change in health status are just a few of the situations that can cause grief. Grief is both physically and emotionally exhausting. COVID, lots of grief too. It is also irrational, unpredictable, and can shake your very foundation. The amount of work your grief requires will depend on your life experiences, the type of loss, and whatever else you have on your plate at that time. A sudden, unexpected loss is usually more traumatic, more disruptive, and requires more time to adjust to. If your loss occurs through violence, expect that all normal grief reactions will be exaggerated. You may lose trust in your own ability to make decisions and or to trust others. Assumptions about fairness, life order, and religious beliefs are often challenged. Smells can bring back memories of a loss and a fresh wave of grief. Seasons, with their colors and climates, can also take you back to that moment in time when your world stood still. You may sense you have no control in your life. Being at work may prove a relief from your grief, but as soon as you get back in the car and start driving home, you may find your grief comes flooding back. You may find that you are incapable of functioning in the work environment for a short while. Because grief is distracting, it also means that you are more accident prone. The object of grieving is not to get over the loss or recover from the loss, but to get through the loss. Over the years, you will look back and discover that this grief keeps teaching you new things about life. Your understanding of life will just keep going deeper. Then it goes on and it says, if you are the cook, if you're the one that's grieving, if your friend is the one who is making tear soup. And then it says, making soup takes time. It says, grief work takes time, much longer than anyone wants it to. And it goes on to for details there. And then if a child is the cook, and if you are a male chef, and if there are two of you cooking, it says grief is unique to the individual. And then it lists all kinds of places to find help. I think these are in the United States, Oregon area. Tea Soup is now available on a DVD narrated by Mary McDonald Lewis. And again, it's published by Grief Watch. This version, I'm sorry, is from 2007. And here is the inside cover. Grandy says, eat your soup. Grandy's fridge. So, this little tough story was for all of you. I hope it brings you some peace, knowing that everyone makes soup. And to breathe deep. Love you all. Thanks for watching. Sweet dreams. Jesus keep you. Hope to see you tomorrow. Good night.